Wales is that kind of travel destination where sheep outnumber people 3 to 1, castles are more common than coffee shops, and the longest place name in Europe will leave your tongue in knots. Wales might be small, but it's packed with enough bizarre and brilliant places to blow your mind. Cardiff is the largest city in Wales, but unlike London, it doesn't pretend it's a global mega-city. No, Cardiff is a real British city with character, equal parts ambition, apathy and dampness. Officially crowned capital of Wales in 1955, Cardiff's history really reads like a crash course in urban reinvention. Originally established as a Roman fort, it later became a Norman stronghold with the construction of Cardiff Castle, which today sits incongruously in the city centre, flanked by pubs and buskers. During the 19th century, the city found itself at the heart of the global coal trade. It transformed from a backwater into the largest coal-exporting port in the world. The rapid industrialisation gave Cardiff both economic clout and urban chaos, the kind of chaos only soot-covered streets and dodgy Victorian plumbing can deliver. Cardiff Castle is the centrepiece of the city. It has been everything from a Roman fort to a Norman keep to a Victorian mansion. In the 19th century, the Marquess of Bute decided the castle needed a makeover and hired architect William Burgess, who responded with Gothic towers and gold-leaf ceilings. It's now open to the public and offers tours that range from historical exhibitions to rooftop views. If nothing else, it's worth visiting just to see how one building can embody 2,000 years of trial and error architecture. Just a few streets away sits the Principality Stadium, originally the Millennium Stadium. The 70,000-seater is the beating heart of Welsh rugby, a place where fans gather to cheer, chant, and collectively question the sanity of referees. Speaking of sports, Cardiff's most famous son is... no, not this guy. It's Gareth Bale, the best British football player of all time. With a population of 380,000, Cardiff is both Wales's largest city and home to 1/10 of the national population. But on any given weekend, the numbers seem to triple, thanks to a constant influx of rugby fans, tourists and university students. With students accounting for roughly 20% of the population, Cardiff has achieved the delicate balance of functioning both as an educational hub and as one of the best places in Wales to buy a kebab at 3 in the morning. The city's road system is a mix of permanent roadworks and potholes so deep they qualify as archaeological sites. Public transport consists of buses and trains, both of which operate according to schedules that seem to have been developed by consulting horoscopes and rolling dice. Cardiff's location on the South Wales coast, at the point where the River Taff flows into the Severn Estuary, has shaped much of its development, geographically, economically, and occasionally disastrously. While being close to the water brings certain benefits, it also guarantees some heavy flooding. The topography of Cardiff is generally flat and forgiving, which makes it great for cyclists and walkers. However, those seeking dramatic Welsh landscapes will need to head further afield, perhaps to the Brecon Beacons, which are only a short drive away. Cardiff Bay is a redeveloped waterfront area where old docks have been replaced with restaurants and bars. It's lovely on sunny days, which, naturally, are scheduled once a month at best. The rest of the time, it's a wind tunnel cleverly disguised as a tourist attraction. For the more cultured visitor, the National Museum Cardiff offers an impressive collection of art and natural history exhibits. It's the perfect place to avoid the rain for a couple of hours. Alright, let's talk about the village on Anglesey, with a name longer than most novels. With 58 characters and a phonetic complexity that baffles even experienced linguists, this Welsh village has become famous, not necessarily for its heritage or beauty, but for possessing one of the longest place names in the world. People come from all over the globe just to take a selfie with the name sign. The place used to have a much shorter name, but in the 19th century someone decided to supersize it. It was all a publicity stunt to get attention, and let's be honest, it totally worked. Now, you're expecting me to say the name, don't you? Okay, let's try. Llanfairpwllgwyngyll goger u queen drob u landus ilio gogo guk. Did I nail it? Let us know in the comments. There is much more to Anglesey than jaw-dislocating place names. Actually, Anglesey is an island northeast of Snowdonia National Park, just across the Menai Strait. It's the largest island in Wales and the 7th largest in the British Isles. It's connected to mainland Wales by not one, but 2 bridges, the Menai Suspension Bridge and Britannia Bridge. The Menai Bridge was built by Thomas Telford in 1826 and was the world's first iron suspension bridge. You can see the attention to detail in the stonework, which was primarily built using local limestone. Anglesey is full of surprises, and the Copper Kingdom in Amlech is just one of them. At one point, it was the world's biggest copper mine. You can visit it, but stick to the marked paths. These mines are old, and you don't want to be that tourist who needs a funeral after falling into a centuries-old shaft. The South Stack Lighthouse is not just your average lighthouse. This bad boy stands on a rocky, windy island off the coast of Holyhead. To get to the lighthouse, you'll need to cross a slightly sketchy bridge. Don't look down unless you're into that kind of thrill. Holyhead gets a bad reputation for being just the place to catch a ferry to Ireland. If you're looking to hop across the Irish Sea, this is your go-to spot. It's been a busy transit point for centuries. And if you're a history freak, check out the Roman fort right in town. Rosnaga is Anglesey's cool kid town. They got some surfing, kiteboarding and beach bars. If you're the type who loves water sports or just likes to watch Welsh people fall off surfboards, this is your spot. Powis Castle was supposed to be the perfect castle, with state-of-the-art defences, symmetrical walls, and 2 lines of fortifications, but the English ran out of cash and manpower before it was finished. Still, even in its incomplete state, the castle is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and one of the best examples of concentric castle design in the UK. Anglesey's coast is anything but boring. The Anglesey Coastal Path is a 130-mile loop, so you can technically start anywhere. But a popular jumping-off point seems to be Holyhead. From there, you've got cliffs, seabirds, and some of the wildest views you'll find in Wales. Before we continue, please consider hitting the like button to help this video reach a wider audience. It's very important. Swansea is a coastal city that's rough around the edges but full of charm. It's Wales's 2nd largest city, located along the southwestern coast. Known for its sweeping bay, industrial heritage, and its most famous son, Dylan Thomas, the poet who described it as an ugly, lovely town, Swansea has long balanced on a knife edge between beauty and decay. Once a hub of the copper industry, the city has always been oscillating between moments of economic promise and grim realities. Areas on the periphery, particularly former mining towns such as Morriston and Caernarfon, reflect some of the structural disadvantages associated with post-industrial decline, including higher levels of unemployment and economic deprivation. The population is a mix of long-standing working-class communities, students, professionals and retirees, with a noticeable influx of international students attending Swansea University. These students inject a welcome vibrancy into the city, at least until term breaks, when some neighbourhoods suddenly feel like ghost towns waiting for life to return. Tourism has become an increasingly important pillar of Swansea's economy, helping the city transition from its industrial past towards a more service-oriented future. Swansea benefits from its coastal location and its proximity to the Gower Peninsula, the first area in the United Kingdom to receive the designation of Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty. Swansea's sporting culture also attracts lots of visitors. The Swansea.com Stadium, home to both Swansea City AFC and Ospreys Rugby Union, is a pilgrimage site for sports fans. The city's cultural tourism is largely shaped by the legacy of Dylan Thomas. The annual Dylan Thomas Festival attracts a niche but dedicated audience of literary lovers, and the Dylan Thomas Centre serves as both a museum and an educational centre. Wales as a travel destination is best known as the land of castles, many of them known for their medieval strength and battle scars. With over 600 castles in the country, each one tries to stand out, but Powis Castle is in a league of its own. It's located near Welshpool, a town best known for being close to, you guessed it, Powis Castle. It's a fortress-turned-stately home that has managed to stay relevant for over 800 years. Originally built in the 13th century as a defensive stronghold for the princes of Powis, it later fell into the hands of the Herbert family, who decided it could use several makeovers. Over time, the castle evolved into a luxurious residence filled with art and odd furniture. Today, it's an essential stop for tourists who enjoy history and horticulture. The gardens of Powis Castle are some of the finest in Wales, maintained to look wild but in a very organised way. The Italianate style of the gardens reflects the Renaissance influence brought to Powis by its wealthy owners. The castle also has a collection of treasures and exotic artefacts looted from India during British colonial rule. Apparently, even castles in rural Wales couldn't resist a bit of imperial plunder. Snowdonia National Park is one of the most celebrated natural landscapes in the United Kingdom. Located in North Wales, the park covers 823 square miles of mountainous terrain, ancient woodlands, lakes and villages. The cultural significance of Snowdonia is inseparable from its place in the Welsh language and identity. The park's Welsh name, Eryri, translates roughly to Land of Eagles, and the region remains a stronghold for the Welsh language. Visitors are gently reminded, often through passive-aggressive road signs, that Welsh is spoken here, and that attempting to pronounce weird place names like Llanberis or Pontcysyllte without practice is an act of linguistic hubris. Snowdonia, then, is not just a landscape, but a cultural homeland, fiercely proud of its heritage and not afraid to let visitors know. The geography of the region is both magnificent and unforgiving. The park is defined by its mountain ranges, with 12 peaks exceeding 3,000 feet, and a landscape sculpted by glacial erosion during the last ice age. The crown jewel of the park is Iarwyddfa, which attracts nearly 600,000 hikers per year, many of whom, upon arrival, discover that climbing a mountain involves more effort than posting some photos of it. Standing at 1,085 metres, it's the highest peak in Wales and England. In medieval times, the mountains provided natural fortifications for Welsh princes, such as Owain Glentyr, who led a rebellion against English rule. It is said that King Arthur's knights roamed these very peaks. The Welsh name Iarwyddfa translates to the tomb, or burial mound, and fittingly, legend has it that the peak is the final resting place of Hitagar, a giant defeated by King Arthur. Despite its stunning beauty, Snowdonia is not exactly known for its friendly weather. Rain is less an occasional inconvenience and more of a lifestyle. Hikers going up the mountain are often greeted by dense fog, gusting winds and driving rain. Those lucky enough to reach the summit on a clear day are rewarded with panoramic views of North Wales, the Isle of Anglesey, and, on rare occasions, Ireland. Somewhere between Snowdonia and the Irish Sea, you'll find Portmeirion, the weirdest place in Wales. This village is the bizarre brainchild of Sir Clough Williams-Ellis. In 1925, this eccentric architect decided to build his own little slice of Italy in the most logically chosen location, the rainy coast of North Wales. This place hit the pop culture jackpot when it became the set of The Prisoner, a cult TV series from the 60s. It was a surreal dystopia where spies get stuck in a beautiful but creepy village that won't let them leave. The architectural style of Portmeirion is difficult to categorise, not because it is particularly innovative, but because it borrows freely from different traditions with reckless abandon. The village is a pastiche, a word that in architectural discourse often carries pejorative undertones, though one suspects that Williams-Ellis would have embraced the term with enthusiasm. In Portmeirion, visitors encounter neoclassical columns, domes similar to Italian churches, brightly coloured stucco facades, and unexpected Gothic touches, all existing harmoniously within a single visual landscape. Indeed, one might wonder whether Williams-Ellis was genuinely interested in creating a serious architectural statement, or simply poking fun at the earnestness of the modernist movement that dominated the early 20th century. Caernarfon is a charming, if somewhat sleepy, seaside destination along the southern edge of the Menai Strait. Edward I of England, clearly not one to do things half-heartedly, commissioned Caernarfon Castle as part of his infamous Iron Ring of fortresses. This grandiose project was initiated in 1283 following the English conquest of Gwynedd, the last independent Welsh kingdom. The castle's design was inspired by the walls of Constantinople, clearly intended to remind the Welsh that resistance was futile. Before Edward's intervention, Caernarfon was a small settlement centred around fishing and agriculture. However, once Edward decided to turn it into a base for colonial expansion, the town underwent drastic changes. A new English borough was established within the shadow of the castle walls, populated by settlers loyal to the crown. Meanwhile, the native Welsh were encouraged to live outside the town walls. The Pontcysyllte Aqueduct is more than just a practical piece of water infrastructure. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site and, let's be honest, a bit of a heart-stopper for those afraid of heights. Spanning the River Dee in northeast Wales, the aqueduct carries the Llanfairpwllgwyngyll Canal across a narrow trough, standing on iron arches and stone piers at an eye-watering 38 metres above the river below. Built between 1795 and 1805, the aqueduct was conceived during the golden age of canal building, when transporting goods by water was all the rage. To say the project was ambitious would be an understatement. Engineers Thomas Telford and William Jessup were tasked with designing a way to extend the Ellesmere Canal across the rugged Welsh terrain. Their mission: create a navigable route that would connect the industrial hubs of England with Wales's agricultural heartlands, improving the transport of goods like coal, iron and limestone. To prevent water from leaking, the cast iron plates were sealed with flannel soaked in boiled sugar and lead, a Victorian equivalent of duct tape. Today, it's more famous as a tourist attraction than a trade route, drawing thousands of tourists each year. In 2009, the aqueduct became a UNESCO World Heritage Site, recognised for its pioneering design and global influence on civil engineering. Wrexham, the largest town in North Wales, has long struggled with its public image. Despite recent attempts to revitalise its reputation, thanks in part to Hollywood actors Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney buying its football club, Wrexham remains firmly planted in the boring town category. While many towns have redeemed themselves through tourism, culture or local charm, Wrexham has stuck to its guns, providing visitors with an experience so uneventful it verges on performance art. Wrexham's list of attractions is best described as brief. The town's main claim to fame is the Wrexham General Market, which is lovely if you're passionate about stalls selling socks and questionable phone cases. Most pubs and bars close early, seemingly in solidarity with the residents, who just want to go home and pretend they're somewhere else. The story of Big Pit is inseparable from Wales's broader mining heritage. Opened in 1880, this mine near Blaenavon was initially part of a network of collieries that provided coal to feed Britain's insatiable appetite for industry. For nearly a century, it operated as a working mine and employed hundreds of men who worked in challenging conditions. By the mid-20th century, however, the decline of the coal industry began to cast a shadow over places like Blaenavon. After several decades of struggling to remain viable, the pit finally ceased coal production in 1980. Since its opening as a museum in 1983, Big Pit has become one of Wales's most popular tourist attractions. The Blaenavon industrial landscape was recognised as a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2000 because it reflects how 18th and 19th century industries transformed not just the economy, but entire societies. Conwy is more than just a small coastal town in North Wales. Though small in size, the town and its UNESCO World Heritage listed castle are one of the finest examples of medieval military architecture in Europe. The population of around 4,000 residents may seem tiny, but the town is part of the larger Conwy County Borough, which includes nearby villages, and has a population of about 115,000. Conwy's medieval walls stretch for 1.3 kilometres around the town. They are remarkably intact, and you can walk along them for great views, or at least for a great excuse to avoid spending money on souvenirs. These walls, once built to keep out enemies, now serve mainly to confuse tourists trying to find their way back to the car park. We've already mentioned King Edward and his iron ring of castles. The construction of Conwy Castle and the town walls took just 4 years. Conwy was more than just a castle. It was a walled royal town, essentially a medieval gated community. The castle itself has 8 massive towers, 2 barbicans, and walls thick enough to shrug off most attacks. The interior of the castle is a mix of ruins and preserved sections. While much of it is roofless now, the remains of grand halls and chapel windows hint at its former glory. Measuring just 6 feet wide and 10 feet tall, the smallest house in Great Britain is one of Conwy's most famous attractions. A fisherman supposedly lived here, proving that minimalism isn't a new trend. Tourists often queue to take selfies inside, though anyone over 5 feet tall should avoid sudden movements. Amazingly, that's still better than some London flats. Conwy's harbour offers charming views of boats bobbing on the water. It's the perfect spot for fish and chips, if you can fend off the seagulls. The harbour area also has some shops and cafes, giving visitors a chance to warm up after the inevitable rain shower. Just a few miles north of Conwy, you'll find Llandudno, the Queen of Welsh resorts. This interesting town sits between 2 headlands, the Great Orme and the Little Orme. It offers a combination of Victorian charm, sea views, and British eccentricity. In the mid-19th century, a property developer named Lord Mostyn saw potential in this small fishing village. He turned it into a model Victorian town, complete with grand hotels, wide promenades, and strict planning rules. Today, it remains one of the best preserved Victorian resorts in the UK. Llandudno has 2 beaches, the North Shore, with its famous Victorian promenade, and the quieter West Shore. Locals will tell you that the North Shore is for tourists and day trippers, and the West Shore for those who like a bit of peace. The Great Orme has some great hiking trails, ancient mines, and an army of wild Kashmiri goats. If climbing the Orme seems too much for you, there's the Great Orme Tramway. This vintage cable tram, built in 1902, takes you from the town up to the top. The Brecon Beacons National Park stretches across South and Mid Wales, covering the traditional counties of Pembrokeshire and Monmouthshire. The famous red kite bird, which was once in danger of going extinct, was saved here, and the park became a safe place for wildlife and a symbol of Welsh conservation. Caernarfon is the highest peak in South Wales, reaching 886 metres. You can hike to its top, with primary trails beginning at the Story Arms Outdoor Centre. These trails, though manageable, often test visitors due to some really steep sections and the area's variable weather. Waterfall country is a woodland area crisscrossed by rivers that create an impressive series of waterfalls. Set in the southwestern part of the Brecon Beacons, it's particularly famous for its 4 main waterfalls, often called the Four Falls Trail. This trail is roughly a 5-mile loop, moderately difficult due to slippery rocks and mud. The beacons have something for everyone. By day, visitors can hike, cycle, or climb their way through the park's many trails. For those less keen on vigorous exercise, the Brecon Mountain Railway offers a scenic route through the park by steam train. It's a perfect option for families, photography fans, and anyone looking to enjoy the views without having to climb a mountain. The park's transport options remain limited, favouring those with private vehicles or a great deal of time. Buses do connect some of the major villages, but frequency isn't exactly their strength. Sheep are practically synonymous with Wales. The hills, valleys and fields of this small nation seem to be constantly peppered with fluffy animals. According to statistics, there are around 10 million sheep in Wales. Welsh rugby fans like to say, "We're outnumbered on the farm, but never on the pitch." Sheep are primarily raised for their meat and wool, although the latter has diminished in economic value since the 20th century due to competition from synthetic fibres. Despite the decline in wool demand, lamb remains a staple product for Welsh exports, marketed globally as a premium product thanks to Wales's geographical indication status. Yet, relying on sheep farming as an economic cornerstone does raise some eyebrows. While farmers proudly maintain this tradition, the sector has struggled to modernise or diversify. Farming subsidies from the European Union have historically kept the industry afloat, with Brexit introducing considerable uncertainty. The Pembrokeshire Coast is the most iconic coastal region of Wales. It stretches along 190 miles of cliffs, sandy beaches and old ruins. The Pembrokeshire Coast National Park is also the only coastal national park in the United Kingdom. Getting there involves a long drive through rural roads, which get narrower as you get closer. The coast was a popular landing point for Vikings. Medieval castles like Pembroke Castle and Manorbier Castle were later built to protect against invaders. Scomer Island, located off the Pembrokeshire coast, is a protected wildlife reserve. Known for its puffin colonies, grey seals and some seabird populations, the island has become a key site for ecotourism. Access to the island is limited to boat transport. Often cited as one of the most beautiful beaches in the world, Barafundle Bay combines golden sands with clear waters in a sheltered cove. Its natural beauty has led to frequent comparisons with Mediterranean beaches, despite the more temperate climate. The beach is accessible only by a footpath. Established in 1970 as a national trail, the Pembrokeshire Coast Path stretches from St Dogmael's in the north to Amroth in the south. The path covers every possible terrain. Tourism authorities recommend the path as a must-see for any visitor to Pembrokeshire, though they often understate the level of physical fitness required. Pembroke Castle's role in Welsh and English history is very important. Originally built by Roger of Montgomery in 1093, it passed through numerous hands, including the Marshall and Herbert families. Its most famous resident, however, was Henry VII, who was born within its walls. The castle was strategically vital throughout the Wars of the Roses and the subsequent Tudor reign. Tenby is the most interesting town on the Pembrokeshire coast. The fact that over 500,000 people travel to Tenby every year is just crazy. Its past is nothing short of eventful. In the 13th century, Norman overlords built walls around the town, determined to keep out pesky Welsh rebels. Victorians believed sea air could cure just about anything and flocked to Tenby for its healing beaches. Some things never change. Modern visitors still come in search of healing, though they're just as likely to leave with a sunburn and a fridge magnet. The pastel-painted houses line the harbour like a candy-coloured postcard. There are some architectural gems like St Mary's Church and the Tudor Merchant's House. Perhaps Tenby's most famous event is the Ironman Wales, a gruelling triathlon that draws athletes from around the globe, each one ready to push their limits in pursuit of glory. The town also knows how to throw a good festival. The annual Tenby Arts Festival celebrates music, literature and community spirit. And of course, there's no escaping the bilingual nature of the place, with Welsh and English both being spoken by the locals. Tourism is Tenby's lifeblood, for better or worse. Each summer, thousands descend upon the town, seduced by promises of beaches, boat tours to Caldey Island, and that elusive dream of sunshine in Wales. This leads to overcrowding, traffic jams, and the annual hunt for parking spaces. We hope you enjoyed this trip to Wales. If you loved the video, please hit the like button and leave a comment to support our channel.